You stand at the edge of a shallow depression in the frozen earth. The air is biting. The wind cuts through your rudimentary clothing, chilling the sweat on your skin. Someone you knew intimately is no longer moving. What do you do now? You look down at the heavy body. It does not breathe. The chest remains perfectly still beneath the frost. For millions of years of mammalian evolution on this planet, this exact moment meant nothing more than discarded, decaying flesh. An animal leaves its fallen behind. A scavenger takes what remains. Nature is highly efficient. Nature is entirely unsentimental. But your brain is changing in the dark. A new network of complex neurons is firing rapidly behind your eyes. This dense network forces you to hold onto the image of this person even when their eyes are closed forever. Why does it hurt so much to simply look at their face? You are experiencing something completely new in the history of the world. You are feeling grief. You are standing at the exact moment humanity separated itself from the rest of the animal kingdom. You are about to invent the concept of a farewell. To understand this overwhelming feeling, you have to look deep inside your own skull. You need to intimately examine the biological machinery that makes mourning possible. Grief is not a passive emotion. It is an active, aggressive state of severe neurological distress. Your amygdala, the primal fear center of your brain, is firing rapidly. Your prefrontal cortex is flooded with stress hormones like cortisol. Your heart rate is dangerously elevated. Your digestion slows down to a halt. Your physical body is reacting as if you are under a violent physical attack, yet the threat is completely invisible. Why would your evolutionary body sabotage itself in this painful way? You must carefully consider the immense physical cost of mourning. Mourning takes precious time. It costs thousands of vital calories. It stops you from hunting. It prevents you from foraging for necessary roots. In a brutal prehistoric world, sitting beside a grave should be a fatal mistake. Evolution is a ruthless editor. It permanently deletes behaviors that waste energy. It should have erased this destructive behavior entirely. It should have made you cold. It should have made you move on instantly to the next meal. But it did not. Why did natural selection favor the brokenhearted? Grief is not a weakness. Grief is the ultimate survival advantage. It is the absolute glue of human civilization. The intense, blinding pain you feel when someone dies is the exact measure of the evolutionary advantage they provided when they were alive. If you did not feel agonizing pain when you lost a valuable tribe member, you would not fight to keep them alive. You would not care for the sick. You would not share your hard-earned food with the injured. The archaeologist Penny Spikins at the University of York has spent years studying this exact phenomenon. Her detailed research suggests that compassion was not a mere byproduct of human intelligence, but rather the essential driving force behind it. Without grief, there is absolutely no empathy. Without empathy, there is absolutely no cooperation. Without cooperation, you are just a hairless ape wandering alone in the snow, waiting to be eaten by a hungry predator. Your distant ancestors learned to use the dead to build the future. You must travel back 400,000 years to see exactly where this began. The place is the mountainous region of northern Spain. The site is a vertical limestone shaft hidden deep underground. Modern archaeologists call it Sima de los Huesos. This translates directly to the pit of bones. It is a terrifying place to navigate. It is pitch black. The air is thin, damp, and completely suffocating. In the late 20th century, a renowned paleoanthropologist named Juan Luis Arzuaga climbed down into this suffocating darkness. He and his dedicated team spent years meticulously excavating the muddy cave floor. He found the fragmented remains of 28 individuals. They belonged to an ancient species called Homo heidelbergensis. They were your distant, heavy-browed cousins. They were robust, incredibly powerful, and built perfectly for a harsh world. They did not fall into this deep pit by accident. They did not wander blindly into the cave and get lost in the dark. Someone carried them. Someone deliberately dropped them down into the protective abyss. Why would early humans drag heavy corpses through a dangerous, collapsing cave system? You have to vividly imagine the raw physical effort required to move a dead body. A human corpse is absolute dead weight. It is awkward and deeply exhausting to lift. It takes multiple strong people to carry a lifeless adult through a narrow, jagged limestone tunnel. They had to use rudimentary, smoking torches made of burning animal fat. They had to risk falling into the jagged abyss themselves. They exerted massive amounts of precious, irreplaceable energy. They did all of this simply to place their dead together in one hidden, protected location. Arswaga and his team found something else in that muddy pit. They found a single, beautiful hand axe. It was carved from striking pink quartz. It was entirely unchipped. It was perfectly crafted by a master hand. It had never been used to butcher meat. It had never been used to cut wood or scrape hides. It was placed there intentionally among the decaying bodies. It was a deliberate offering. You are looking at the first known symbol of human grief in the entire archaeological record. Your ancestors finally realized that the person they lost was still somewhat present. They existed vividly in the minds of the traumatized survivors. Psychologists call this specific phenomenon person permanence. You know that an object still exists even when you close your eyes or turn your head. Your ancient brain slowly evolved to apply this cognitive mechanism to complex human relationships. You could easily simulate the voice of your mother. You could accurately simulate the specific, booming laugh of your hunting partner. When they died, your brain could not easily delete that complex neural simulation. The cognitive dissonance between their living memory and their dead body created a terrible psychological friction. How do you resolve a pain that you cannot physically touch or see? You invent a ritual. You jump forward in time to the towering Zagros Mountains of modern-day Iraq. The wind howls violently across the jagged limestone cliffs. This is the massive Shanidar Cave. It is 50,000 years ago. The desperate people seeking shelter here are Neanderthals. You are standing beside a specific individual known to modern science as Shanidar 1. He is a very old man. He is perhaps 40 or 50 years old. That is incredibly ancient for this harsh, unforgiving era of ice and stone. He has a violently crushed eye socket. He is completely blind in his left eye. He is profoundly deaf in his left ear. His right arm is severely withered and amputated above the elbow. He has walked with a severe, painful limp for decades due to a badly fractured foot. How did a man so completely broken survive in a world of ice and apex predators? He survived simply because he was loved. He survived because his tribe actively and constantly kept him alive. They patiently chewed his tough food for him when his teeth wore down to the bleeding gums. They fiercely protected him when he could not run from looming danger. When he finally succumbed to his many injuries and extreme age, they did not abandon his body to the waiting wolves. A prominent researcher named Paul Pettit has spent years intensely analyzing these exact types of early burial sites. The Neanderthals at Shanidar did something truly extraordinary. They dug a specific, intentional trench for this crippled old man. They placed him carefully inside the cold earth. They arranged his stiff body in a peaceful, fetal sleeping position. This was not just about hiding a rotting corpse from hungry hyenas. This was an act of profound, deliberate, and heartbreaking tenderness. You are witnessing the raw physical manifestation of sorrow. Let us carefully recreate a single day in this ancient, freezing world. You wake up shivering on the hard cave floor. The fire is dying down to glowing, smoking embers. One of your closest tribe members has not opened their eyes. You gently shake their heavy shoulder. They are terrifyingly cold to the touch. The entire group completely stops moving. Nobody leaves the safety of the cave to hunt. Nobody leaves to forage for necessary tubers. The strict, life or death schedule of prehistoric survival is completely and totally paused. You gather tightly around the motionless body. You feel a heavy, suffocating weight pressing down on your chest. This is your biology processing a massive, sudden spike of stress hormones. You desperately need to do something with your hands to process the absolute chaos raging in your mind. You start digging into the floor. You break the frozen, unyielding earth with a sharp wooden stick. Your bare fingers bleed from the constant friction. You do not care about the physical pain. You line the bottom of the rough pit with soft, fragrant pine branches. You lay the body down as gently as your aching muscles can manage. You cover them with dirt and heavy stones to keep the scavengers safely away. You stand there in total, crushing silence. You have just completed the first actual funeral. You have permanently changed the physical landscape to perfectly reflect the shape of your emotional pain. The story shifts again across the globe. You move to the sun-baked Levant. We are in modern-day Israel. The specific location is Qafzeh Cave. A brilliant researcher named Irela Hovers meticulously examines the ancient ground here. She finds the buried remains of early Homo sapiens. You are now looking directly at your own immediate, fully modern ancestors. They are buried with large, deliberate pieces of red ochre. Ochre is an incredibly rich, iron-based clay. It leaves a deep, blood-red stain on absolutely everything it touches. It has absolutely no practical use for hunting or gathering. It has 0 nutritional calories. It does not keep you warm during the freezing winter nights. Yet, your ancestors carried heavy, cumbersome blocks of it for miles just to sprinkle it over the dead. They intentionally stained the pale bones bright red. What does a bright red stain offer a lifeless, decaying body? It offers the powerful illusion of life. Blood is red. Life is red. By completely covering the dead in vibrant ochre, your ancestors were desperately trying to give them back their lost vitality. They were actively and stubbornly fighting against the terrifying finality of death. They were creating a symbolic, magical bridge between the world of the living and whatever dark mystery came next. This massive cognitive leap changed everything about human existence. When you carefully bury someone in a specific place, that land fundamentally transforms. It becomes deeply sacred. It becomes unequivocally yours. The dead begin to anchor nomadic, wandering tribes to specific, clearly defined territories. The scattered graves become permanent geographic markers. They become the literal foundation of human culture and property. You return to the exact same cave year after freezing year. You do not just return for basic shelter from the blinding snow. You return specifically to visit the hidden bones of your grandfather. The dead are still actively working for the tribe. They are holding your fragile, vulnerable society together from beneath the dark soil. The practice of honoring the dead continued to evolve and grow more elaborate. Fast forward to the bitter end of the last ice age. You find yourself in what is now modern-day Italy, at a coastal site called Arene Candide. Archaeologists painstakingly uncovered the remains of a young teenage boy. He is widely known as the Young Prince. He was buried roughly 24,000 years ago. He is wearing a stunningly complex cap made of hundreds of perfectly perforated shells and polished deer teeth. He holds a massive, beautifully knapped flint blade in his lifeless hand. His entire body is covered in a thick, heavy layer of bright red ochre. This is not just a simple disposal of a rotting body. This is a dramatic, incredibly resource-intensive display of deep affection and social status. The sheer amount of time it took to pierce those tiny shells, to craft that flawless flint blade, and to gather that much rare ochre is completely staggering. Your ancestors were no longer just reacting blindly to death. They were actively and deliberately curating the memory of the deceased. They were making absolutely sure that the young prince would carry his unique identity into the dark unknown. This dramatic shift in behavior reflects a profound, unstoppable evolution in the human brain. The rapid development of spoken language allowed your ancestors to tell long stories about the dead. A person no longer simply ceased to exist when their heart stopped beating. They became a revered ancestor, a lingering spirit, a guiding force in the dark. The physical body was entirely gone, but their powerful narrative survived the rot. The burial site became a physical anchor for these essential stories, a place where the living could go to directly communicate with the invisible past. Consider the shocking discoveries made by paleoanthropologist Lee Berger in the Rising Star Cave system in South Africa. Deep within a nearly inaccessible, terrifyingly narrow chamber, scientists found the sprawling remains of Homo naledi. This was a mysterious species with a brain only a third the size of yours. Yet, the overwhelming physical evidence suggests they deliberately and repeatedly deposited their dead in this remote, pitch-black chamber over many generations. If a primitive hominin with a much smaller brain was completely capable of recognizing the deep significance of death and taking extreme physical risks to isolate their dead, it means something incredible. It means the deep roots of grief run much further down in your evolutionary tree than anyone ever dared to imagine. Grief is certainly not a recent invention of modern, comfortable civilization. It is an ancient, primal instinct that significantly predates your own species. It is permanently woven into the very chemical fabric of your DNA. But as early human societies slowly grew larger and far more complex, the fundamental nature of the farewell began to drastically change. With the slow dawn of agriculture, people finally stopped wandering the earth. They built permanent, sprawling settlements. They built massive stone walls. And they built permanent cities entirely for the dead. Dedicated cemeteries emerged from the dirt. The scale of mourning permanently expanded from a small, intimate circle of tribe members to a massive, collective societal ritual. The monuments grew incredibly larger. The towering pyramids of Egypt, the massive megalithic tombs of Western Europe, the silent terracotta army of ancient China. All of these breathtaking structures are simply massive, architectural expressions of the exact same feeling that caused your hairy ancestors to drop a pink quartz hand axe into a dark pit in Spain. They are all desperate, monumental attempts to completely defy the absolute finality of death. They are all desperate, sweeping attempts to hold onto someone who is slowly slipping away into the void. You must think about how this applies to the world you inhabit right now. Today, you live in a completely different, highly sanitized world. You live in a modern society that aggressively tries to hide death away in hospitals and mortuaries. You wear somber black clothing. You sit silently in quiet, sterile rooms filled with awkward silence. You hire expensive strangers to handle the physical bodies of your loved ones. You are completely separated from the raw, physical reality of the end of life. You are fully expected to return to your modern, fluorescent-lit job in a few short days as if nothing truly monumental has happened to your world. You feel incredibly, painfully isolated in your deep sadness. You feel like your overwhelming grief is a strange anomaly. You feel it is an annoying illness that needs to be quickly fixed, managed by a therapist, or heavily medicated away. You completely forget a fundamental, undeniable truth about your own biology. You forget that the heavy, crushing feeling in your chest is the oldest connective tissue in the entire human experience. It is the exact same feeling that forced your ancient ancestors to dig into the frozen earth with their bare, bleeding fingers. It is the exact same feeling that drove them to patiently chew the tough food for a broken, aging, blind man in a freezing cave. Your deep sorrow is absolutely not a bug in the biological system. It is the loud, echoing reflection of a prehistoric survival strategy. You grieve heavily because your ancestors learned the hardest lesson of all. They learned that the only way to survive the sheer, unapologetic brutality of nature was to care desperately, irrationally, and deeply about each other. You know exactly what to do now. You stand by that shallow depression in the freezing air, because the one who is no longer moving will never truly leave you.